and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Muroki and Inaya Falarin Iman on your TV, online and radio.
Yes, we're with you until midday with all of the biggest stories of the day, taking expert guests and your opinions as well as ours.
Yes, and you can get those opinions in at GBViews at gbnews.uk. We'll get to those throughout the show, but first, here's your latest headlines.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 10. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's defended the Chancellor's economic strategy, saying her government had to take urgent action to get the economy growing. Liz Truss has backed Kwasi Kwarteng, calling his mini-budget the right plan. Yesterday, the Bank of England intervened in an attempt to stabilise the UK's economy by launching a £65 billion government bond buying programme. Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Chris Philp, told GB News he thinks the reaction from British businesses is vital to the growth plan.
Know that their members will be able to grow more quickly, invest more, create more jobs and higher paid jobs as a result of this growth plan. And that is the reaction I think that is the most important one, because it'll put this country on the path to higher growth, which is good for families and households because it'll mean more jobs and higher earnings, and it'll be good news for public services because it'll generate a more sustainable tax base to fund those critical things like the NHS, education and the police.
Meanwhile, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, told us the government's measures have resulted in financial instability.
This has been a reckless act of choice. It's not some tough decision that was necessary, and it's resulted in enormous instability for the country. That's why we've called for Parliament to be recalled, for this package to be paused and revisited.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It'll prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. The average household's energy bill will rise by 25% to a capped £2,500. The government's rolling out £1.5 billion in funding to help improve energy efficiency and slash bills. The Help to Heat scheme will see around 130,000 low-income households get an energy upgrade in their home, including installing heat pumps and solar panels. It'll also help people save up to £700 a year on bills. Local authorities will be able to apply for funding from early next year. A US citizen accused of killing a 19-year-old motorcyclist in Northamptonshire is set to appear in a UK court for the first time today. Anne Sekulas is accused of causing death by dangerous driving after Harry Dunn was killed in a collision outside a military base in August 2019. Sekulas had been granted diplomatic immunity, but is expected to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court via video link from America later. One of the largest storms to hit the US in years has left millions without power. Hurricane Ian is now moving inland after making landfall in southwestern Florida late last night. With winds of up to 150 miles per hour, the catastrophic Category 4 storm has flooded coastal towns along Florida's Gulf Coast and left homes in ruins. Most residents have left the area after the governor of Florida urged people to evacuate. No serious injuries have yet been reported. Sweden has reported a new leak in a major undersea pipeline carrying Russian natural gas to the EU. It's the fourth leak to the Nord Stream pipeline reported this week by either Sweden or Denmark. The European Union suspects they've been caused by sabotage. Russia's dismissed suggestions it's attacked its own pipelines. Defence and Foreign Affairs editor for the Daily Telegraph, Con Gochlin, told us that the Russians have the capability to cause the leaks.
Straight out of the Russian playbook to intimidate Europe into dropping its support for Ukraine. This sends a very bleak message to Europe and the outside world that, you know, the Russians have the capability to do this kind of thing. Of course, we have to couch this with an allegation because we just don't know what happened. And of course, we could all look very silly if it's just a technical fault that's happened, but it seems very unlikely at this point.
And another reason to call a dog a man's best friend. A new study suggests canines can sniff out stress in our sweat and breath. 4 dogs successfully identified the majority of samples of sweat or breath that had been taken from a stressed person after they'd completed a tricky maths problem. The researchers at Queen's University Belfast hope their study will help in the training of therapy dogs. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Mercy and Anaya with To The Point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Inaya Falarin Iman on your TV, radio and online. We've got a great show lined up for you to kickstart your Thursday. So here's what's coming up.
Yes, well, Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng and Prime Minister Liz Truss are under increasing pressure to defend their economic plans after a £65 billion intervention by the Bank of England to protect pensions and avoid a financial crisis. Our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, is here to give us the latest.
Yes, and speaking of pressure, Tory party conference kicks off this Sunday and former Chancellor Rishi Sunak will not be attending, with allies saying he was giving Liz Truss, quote, all the space she needs to own the moment. Well, can the Tories use the conference to turn their fortunes around? We'll discuss.
And members of the public will be able to see the Queen's final resting place today when Windsor Castle reopens later. It has been closed to the public since the Queen's death on September 8th.
Yes, that's all coming up and much more as well across the programme. We're here with you until midday, as usual. And remember to get your views in, GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Now to our top story. This morning, pressure continues to mount on the Prime Minister Liz Truss and Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng after the Bank of England announced they would buy £65 billion worth of government bonds to avoid a crisis in pension funds.
Yes, well, yesterday our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, spoke to the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, to get his thoughts on the fallout from the government's budget. Let's take a look.
The government has lost control of the economy. That is a self-inflicted wound. It's not some event that was uncontrollable, you know, internationally. It's a self-inflicted wound by the government. For what? For uncosted tax breaks for those earning hundreds of thousands of pounds.
That was Sir Keir Starmer speaking to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Well, earlier, Emily Carver spoke to Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, on the state of our economy.
The $64,000 question is whether or not this will end up being regarded by the public as a fiscal stroke economic crisis on a similar scale to the financial crash of 2008 to 9, and perhaps above all, the ERM crisis of 1992. Now, in the wake of the ERM crisis, the UK economy grew. The economy had one of its best spells, which then continued under New Labour. But that sight of the government having to submit to the judgment of the markets, that the UK could not remain inside the exchange rate market at the level at which the pound was then pegged, just destroyed the Conservatives' reputation for economic competence. Of course, the government will reply quite reasonably, we are going to pursue growth, we're going to achieve growth. And indeed, if the government does achieve growth, maybe the events of these few days will be forgotten.
Well, let's get the thoughts of our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Good morning, Liam. In quite a bit of a mess, aren't we? Firstly, just explain where we are at the moment and what the Bank of England's reaction has been.
So what we saw yesterday, Mercy, was what I've been calling the first rung on the ladder of emergency measures. It was an emergency measure because it happened outside the Bank of England's usual series of monthly meetings. Now, it so happens, in a sort of historic irony, there isn't a meeting scheduled for October, so the next one isn't until early November, because they have 10 meetings a year. So there isn't one in October. What happened yesterday is that the Bank of England didn't implement an emergency interest rate rise, which many people were calling for, to prop up the pound. And the government certainly didn't backtrack from its tax changes, which have been very much in the firing line for causing this kind of roller coaster on financial markets. What the Bank of England did was very technical and quite difficult to explain, but basically the Bank of England helped the government to sell its debt. Now, governments sell debt all the time around the world. That's how they borrow. They sell a bond, which is called a gilt, because it's gilt-hedged. In the old days, the Bank of England's bonds, they literally had gold around the edges to say, we are the United Kingdom and we will pay back your debt. So it's gilt-edged. That's where the phrase comes from. And yesterday, the Bank of England indicated to financial markets that rather than selling bonds into the market itself, which it was doing, it's going to start buying bonds. And that makes bonds more attractive because people who are lending the government money know the Bank of England is also there buying the bonds alongside them. That's why the pound levelled off yesterday. It recovered. It's about $1.08 now, which it went down to $1.03 at the height of this crisis, almost near parity 1-to-1. But crucially, even though the pound hogs all the headlines, because it's kind of easier to understand, it's the gilts market that's really important, which is the borrowing cost for the government. That interest rate ripples out across the whole of the rest of the economy into personal loans, mortgages and so on. And the good news is, Mercy, that this Bank of England intervention for now seems to have worked. It's reassured financial markets lending money to the government because, and here's the headline that you won't hear anywhere else or not many places, the government's borrowing cost on 10-year money, borrowing for 10 years, has gone down from over 4.5% to around 4%, and it's been at 4% since around 4 o'clock yesterday, so that seems to be sticking for now.
Explain to us what the causes are, because I mean, Liz Truss has only been Prime Minister for a couple of weeks, and surely she would have also inherited a challenging economic situation. Is it correct to say that reversing the top rate in tax is the cause? Or because I've even read some Conservative commentators saying that the markets are actually scared of a possible Keir Starmer leadership. I mean, what is the actual cause of this?
I think the idea that the markets are scared of a Keir Starmer leadership is a red herring. There's not much chance of Keir Starmer becoming Prime Minister any time soon. The Tories aren't likely to call a general election, so I do think that's a bit of a red herring. There's a lot of political mischief making going on here, both from Tories against the Labour Party, Tories who don't like Liz Truss, and of course she didn't get much of a mandate among her MPs. A lot of them still hold a candle for Rishi Sunak, trying to destabilise her premiership and the Chancellor's position too. It's a hodgepodge in really. I would say the actual fiscal measures in that mini budget that Kwasi Kwarteng outlined on Friday that we didn't already know about, that weren't priced in, were minimal. We knew that the corporation tax rise wasn't going to happen. We knew he was going to reverse the national insurance increase that Rishi Sunak implemented in April. We knew there was going to be an energy price cap.
Yeah.
Liz Truss announced it before the unfortunate death of Her Majesty the Queen in the House of Commons. The only thing we really learned on Friday was that they were going to cut the top rate of tax.
Exactly.
I've called that indulgent. I don't think it was the right time to cut the top rate of tax when so many people are concerned about making ends meet. A tax cut for people earning more than 150 grand, you know, pretty well-off people. And that created a mood where the government was always going to come in for a kicking by a lot of the media. That created a mood where it looked as if the government was playing fast and loose at a time when we knew we were going into a difficult period in terms of tax and spend with the energy price cap and so on. I think that was a step too far. It wasn't the measure itself, the amount of money it cost, because it cost hardly anything, a couple of billion quid, but it was the trigger that caused angst in the markets and indeed across politics as a whole.
And just talk to us about mortgages at the moment, because that's the thing that's really worrying some people. And we know the government is bringing in an energy price cap, for instance, but some of the savings people are making from that compared to what they would have been paying might be wiped out by higher mortgage rates if they are on those tracker mortgages.
Indeed, all these technical things, they matter because that gilt yield I mentioned, the amount that the government has to pay to borrow, which has just come down on these Bank of England emergency measures yesterday, that is what the mortgage companies look at. That is what we call the benchmark. If the government can borrow at this rate, then we are going to charge, you know, Mercy Muroki to buy a new house this for a new mortgage, or when you come off a fixed rate mortgage, when you have to, and go on to variable and then you want to fix again. Look, mortgage costs across the world are going up. We are moving out of an ultra low interest rate environment that we've been in since the global financial crisis aftermath in 2009-10. Interest rates are going up across the world. That would have happened anyway. I would say that the Bank of England should have been raising interest rates a lot faster, a lot sooner over the last year. They kept telling me that inflation was transitory. I kept saying it wasn't, as some other economists did. It turned out that we were right. It gives me no pleasure to say that. If the Bank of England had started raising interest rates earlier, then I don't think financial markets would be in such angst. So look, interest rates are going up. The question is, will this panic mean that they go up faster and further than they otherwise would have done to press down on inflation? And I think they do, unfortunately. I do think interest rates are going to go up to 5%, maybe even 6%. And that is what the financial markets are showing. That's where they expect them to go. And for a lot of people, that will mean extremely difficult times. There's no... I don't want to be gloomy about it, but I'd rather be gloomy than wrong. I genuinely think that will happen, unfortunately.
And finally, what do you make of the intervention by the IMF recently, calling on the government to re-evaluate its measures? And the BBC described their intervention as direct, uncompromising, unflinching and humiliating.
I think it's all those things, but I'd also add to that list, which the BBC won't, unsuitable. I don't think it's the IMF's place to say this to a country like the UK. We're nowhere near a bailout situation. The UK government is nowhere near having to go to the IMF as we did in 1976. I just about remember that, and you weren't born, but a lot of people watching this programme will remember that bailout. We're nowhere near that. It seems pretty politically mischievous to me by the IMF. It's pretty mischievous for Joe Biden, no friend of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, on the opposite side of the political fence, to start commenting. Look, Japan's central bank just did pretty much exactly the same thing that the British central bank did here in the UK. This is not unusual. Interest rates are going up across the world. The reality is that the UK's national debt is actually quite low by the standards of other G7 countries. What matters is the rate at which the government has to issue new debt. And I do think the market's got some legitimate concerns about that, but I think the IMF weighing in and raising the red flag doesn't really help anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, Liam, thank you so much for bringing us the clarity we needed on that story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to some of your views. Of course, as we'd expect, lots of you are getting in touch with your comments and concerns about what is happening in the economy. Mike has an interesting point. He says the decision to reduce the top rate of tax is the correct one to encourage top earners from every industry around the world to seriously consider the UK as a place to conduct business. Mike says the fact it benefits the top earners already here is a small price to pay. So that's interesting because, you know, as we were just hearing from Liam there, that has come under a lot of criticism because many people are saying, look, you didn't have to do this. This seems to have just been, you know, an extra thing thrown in that has caused way more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah.
But actually, you know, we have to remember some people do think actually perhaps it is part of a package of making the UK a much more attractive place to conduct business and to be wealthy.
I think that, you know, I think that Liam was right to say that what has happened is kind of created this mood that seems to have spooked the markets. But I actually think if you look at that's just one measure in a whole range of different measures, and to kind of suggest that a whole economic crisis has ensued because the top rate of taxes has been removed seems to me to be quite an extraordinary claim.
Yeah, and let's not forget, you know, it's £2 billion we're talking here. You know, that's not exactly going to wouldn't have set off the sort of alarm bells that we're seeing at the moment. But it, as Liam again said, it's a serious. It's that measure in the context of what's already
has
happening.
been symbolic.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
Please continue to send in your views on this very big story. Well, after the break, Labour Party conference ended with the party in an upbeat and optimistic mood. But will the Tories be able to respond and change the narrative? That's just after the weather.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a chilly start out there this morning with some low cloud and fog, but soon enough, sunshine and showers will follow. And actually, it will be a touch warmer this afternoon compared with the last few days. Low pressure is moving away. That's heading towards Denmark. Around that low, we've still got this cool north to northeasterly airflow, and a weather front has sunk south overnight. That's clearing the southwest first thing. Showers moving away as it clears, and a blustery wind here. Elsewhere, any early low cloud and fog clearing away. Brighter skies follow into the afternoon, and actually for many, sunny spells will prevail through the afternoon. But there will be a few more showers turning up, especially around the north and the east of England, parts of central and eastern Scotland, for example. 16 to 18 Celsius typically, so a little warmer compared with recent days. The highest temperatures expected across parts of Wales and the southwest. Any remaining showers this evening soon enough fade away, and then lengthy clear spells for much of England, Wales, eastern Scotland overnight. But for the rest of Scotland, for Northern Ireland as well, thicker cloud and an increase in the breeze during the early hours will bring outbreaks of rain to the far northwest later. That'll keep things mild, 11 or 12 Celsius here, whilst mid to low single figures are expected elsewhere under clear skies and lighter winds. And with that, we'll also see some mist and fog first thing, especially for central parts of England, perhaps the east of England as well. Some of that will stick around until mid-morning. Then high cloud pushes in, and eventually a band of heavy rain as well as strong winds. Gales around exposed western coasts and hills. So a blustery and unsettled end to the day for all, with that heavy rain making things very soggy and unpleasant. Temperatures suppressed under the wet and windy weather. Saturday sees further rain or showers in many places. Windy again for the south coast. Sunday's a little calmer, mostly dry in the south, showers in the north.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:24 a.m. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Lauren Emman and Mercy Muroki. We're live on your TV, radio and online.
Yes, now the Conservative Party conference kicks off this weekend in Birmingham, and one person who will not be attending the Tory party conference is former Chancellor and leadership candidate Rishi Sunak. An ally of his told the Sunday Times that he was giving Liz Truss, quote, all the space she needs to own the moment.
But can the Tory conference be a success given the pressure faced by the Prime Minister Liz Truss and Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng? Well, joining us now is Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Do you think that Liz Truss can turn it around and build some momentum around the conference?
Well, she has absolutely no choice. I think what Liz Truss realises is that given the precarity of her position, the fact that she didn't win the MP round in the leadership contest, the fact that she has relatively few allies, the moment she comes to a halt politically, the sharks are going to start closing in. So she and Kwasi Kwarteng have no choice but to push forward and try and get back on the front foot. Now, conference is obviously a chance to do that. A good speech at conference, especially one from the Chancellor, could potentially change the way that her government is perceived, but it's going to be an incredibly fraught, high-wire act for the pair of them to try and make it through the week.
I think when the conference is over, they would have looked back and said, to be honest, that did us more harm than good. Because let's be honest, there are lots of people in Liz Truss's party, lots of MPs, who will be briefing journalists, who will be telling journalists, I actually don't agree with this and I don't, quite frankly, want anything to do with it.
I mean, potentially, yes, but you can't govern the country by hiding from the press and the public forever, much as I'm sure some politicians would like to. I think the briefing is less of an issue because, bluntly, those MPs are briefing journalists anyway because they're all just in London. But I think that the danger for Truss and Kwarteng basically is that each of them will have a big high-profile conference speech. Now, if that goes well, that's a chance to reassure the markets, reassure their own backbenches, try and communicate their version of what they're doing to the country, which they've been signally bad at doing so far. But if they get that wrong, then they risk baking in incredibly early a public image that they are out of touch, that they have lost control of the economy, and that could cling to the Tories all the way up to the next general election.
We saw those polls, didn't we, yesterday, that put Labour, I think, 17 points ahead, whatever the figure was. It was the biggest gap in 20 years. Is there any way for Conservatives to claw back support before the next general election?
Yeah, there is some. Labour's position is not quite as locked in as it was in, say, the mid-1990s. Most of that lead is Tory voters from 2019 moving to Don't Know rather than moving to Labour, which suggests the Tories could win them back, although I think Liz Truss might struggle given how she's pivoting away from the sort of conservatism that won that 2019 majority. But what Liz Truss is doing is she is gambling on growth. And if that works, and if in 18 months' time we do have an economy that's growing at a fast pace, people are feeling richer, it's creating more jobs, then the voters will reward that because they nearly always reward that. But it is a huge gamble. And I think the big problem for Liz Truss is that for all that she talks about supply-side reform, the supply-side reform we really need is on housing and planning, and Tory MPs won't let her do that.
And do you think that former Chancellor Rishi Sunak has been vindicated?
I mean, in as much as he said that this would probably be the market reaction to the sort of proposals that she was talking about during the campaign, yes. I think there were still big questions about whether or not Rishi Sunak had the right political instincts to be a successful Prime Minister. There was a reason that there was a relative lack of enthusiasm for him relative to other first-round candidates. But yes, I think even people who agree with Liz Truss ideologically and on the intellectual basis for her economic policy need to concede that this is a very difficult time to try and do it politically, more than halfway through a parliament, when we've lost 3 years to the pandemic already. You know, a lot of these measures, even if they do work, they're not going to deliver results by the time of the next election. So yes, I think Rishi Sunak's steady as you go's message during the campaign was more boring. It wasn't necessarily what Tory activists wanted to hear, but it does seem to have been the right thing for the moment.
On that point, do you think that has been some of the challenge with Liz Truss, that she's kind of fundamentally changed the direction of this government without necessarily having that mandate? So she's kind of touted some of these policies around immigration, these tax cuts and so on, and that's not what 2019 was about, and that's not what people voted for. She has to take the public with her, and so far she hasn't necessarily done that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is almost exactly what the problem is. And that's a problem for several reasons. Of course, changing government in the middle of a parliament is completely constitutional. She's under no obligation to seek an election. But it means that Tory MPs, even those who disagree with her, haven't committed to supporting these proposals. It means the House of Lords don't need to let these proposals through. It's a huge problem for her, and normally in these circumstances she would go for an early election to win her own mandate, but she can't because she's so far behind in the polls. I think it would have been much wiser for her to spend the next year, 2 years, focusing on delivering on the promises the Tories made in 2019, and then try to win her own mandate after that.
Henry Hill, thank you so much for joining us this morning, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Now, we have some of your views, and I think it's been interesting looking at what you guys have had to say at home about the Conservatives, because from my perspective anyway, I am sensing people are moving away from the Conservatives from what you have been sending in a way that I haven't seen before. Steve says the inequality is only going to worsen and the Tory party need kicking out. The Tories don't care apart from their friends, the wealthy and the rich.
Yeah, it's interesting. Mick says the new Tory government under Liz Truss is being subjected to the same left-wing establishment machine onslaught as what happened with Boris Johnson. I mean, I think people are holding them to account, as the economy does seem to be going in a negative direction, to say the least. But I do think it is also fair to say that, you know, Boris Johnson did face a very challenging time under the media, and as we had with our economics editor on the show earlier, you know, had quite an extraordinary intervention by the IMF, when this is an actual democracy, a G7 country, and we are not a kind of basket case to make those kinds of interventions, and they're in no position to speak after what happened to Greece. So I do think that whilst, you know, there are fair criticisms of the government, some of the other interventions by Joe Biden and the IMF has been unwarranted, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the IMF would say, look, one of our explicitly stated roles is to ensure, you know, responsible fiscal policies across global economies. And so they'd say, well, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to ensure that that takes place for the health of the global economy. A couple of more views. Sean says, Truss and Sunak have only been in for 3 weeks, for goodness sake. I think you mean Truss and Kwesi Kwarteng. This post-global pandemic economy isn't a quick fix unless you're Harry Potter. That's true. Lots of people are saying, look, give them more time. We've had the death of our head of state, and they haven't really had a chance to get going. They've only just announced the policies, so give them a chance.
Well, I think, you know, a counter-argument may be that, you know, they knew that when Liz Truss absolutely knew that she was going to be facing a very difficult situation, and that she only had a certain number of months left, and that she would have to get the ball rolling, and expectations were very high. So she went into this with her eyes open, I would say.
Yes, well, keep your views coming in, GBviews at gbnews.uk. But coming up, Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, says the UK will never recognise the sham referenda held in Russian-occupied regions of Ukraine. And on that story as well, a fourth leak has been reported on the Nord Stream gas pipelines. People are saying Russia are to blame. We'll be speaking about all that after this break.
Good morning, it's 10:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister's defended the Chancellor's economic plan, saying her government had to take urgent action to get the economy growing. Liz Truss has backed Kwasi Kwarteng, calling his mini-budget the right plan. Yesterday, the Bank of England intervened in an attempt to stabilise the UK's economy by launching a £65 billion government bond buying programme. Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, told GB News the government's measures have resulted in financial instability.
This has been a reckless act of choice. It's not some tough decision that was necessary, and it's resulted in enormous instability for the country. That's why we've called for Parliament to be recalled, for this package to be paused and revisited.
Being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It will prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. The average household's energy bill will rise by 25% to a capped £2,500. Meanwhile, the government's rolling out £1.5 billion in funding to help improve energy efficiency and slash bills. The Help to Heat scheme will see around 130,000 low-income households get an energy upgrade in their home, including installing heat pumps and solar panels. It'll also help people save up to £700 a year on bills. Local authorities will be able to apply for funding from early next year. And US rapper Coolio, known for the 1990s song Gangsta's Paradise, has died at the age of 59. The hit became one of the most successful raps of all time, winning a Grammy in 1996. Coolio's exact cause of death yesterday hasn't been revealed, but his manager told US media he was found unresponsive on the bathroom floor of a friend's house in Los Angeles. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. A quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.084 and €1.120. The price of gold currently stands at £1,518.33 per ounce.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:38 and this is To The Point with myself, Mercy Muroki, and Inaya Falarin Iman as well on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
Yes, well, Prime Minister Liz Truss spoke yesterday with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Truss said that the UK, quote, will never recognise the sham referendums held by Russian occupying forces in the areas of Donetsk, Luhansk and Kherson.
And the latest news from today is that a fourth leak has now been reported on the Nord Stream gas pipelines. It comes after 3 other leaks were found, which run from Russia to Germany, with sabotage suspected.
Yes, we're delighted to be joined now by Ukrainian MP and leader of the Golos party, Kira Rudik. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, do you think that the West and other forces supporting Ukraine are reacting strong enough to what seems to be extraordinary steps that Russia is taking now?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Well, the Western leaders have condemned so-called referendums and called them sham referendums. But is this enough? Does it stop Putin from actually annexing our territories and then moving his forces onto those territories and saying that right now they are protecting new Russian territories? No, condemnation does not stop Putin. We all know that. What stops Putin is additional weapons. What stops Putin is additional support for Ukraine and sanctions that would critically decrease his economy. Look at the 8th package of sanctions that is prepared by the European countries. I do not think that there is anything there that would actually stop him or at least push him back. There are limitations on the diamonds export, there are limitations on the oil prices, and there are limitations on the operation of various Russian banks. But it is not the hit that Putin needs to take to stop doing what he is doing. He is basically annexing Ukrainian territory and committing all kinds of war crimes in the 21st century. So the response of the Western allies needs to be much stronger, because though maybe it is hurting Putin and Russia a little bit, it doesn't stop them from moving forward with his plan. He is going with the same idea that he had 8 years ago when Russia annexed Crimea, had sham referendum there, and moved their forces to protect their new territories. We see where it led us. The dictator became just stronger and gathered his forces to move further with annexing the territory of the sovereign country, which Ukraine is. So right now, we do need more weapons. We do need more support, because this is the only proper way to contradict what Putin is doing. If we got our weapons earlier, we would be able to take back more of our territories, and then the referendums would not be held on these territories. Unfortunately, even what we are promised right now, we will only receive like in a couple of months, and that may be too late. So right now we are calling for all the democratic world leaders to speed up all the processes and to supply all kinds of weapons that Ukraine may need to push the Russians back from our territories.
And I just wondered what your reaction was to what's been happening over the last couple of days, these explosions on these pipelines, which is now being confirmed to be gas leaks on Nord Stream, which carries gas from Russia to the EU. Some EU leaders have said, look, this was absolutely a state actor who would have had to have done this. They haven't necessarily directly accused Russia, but there is that implication that Russia is committing sabotage, essentially. What's your reaction to
that? The main question when you hear about things like this is who benefits of it? And we are all sure that Russia benefits of it because it strangles European countries and creates more and more tension before the winter comes. We knew in Ukraine that Russia will be attacking our fuel storages, our gas storages, to make sure that Ukrainian people will not have enough of energy supplies to survive winter. This is what Russia is doing right now to his allies or to the countries that are buying gas from them. They are saying, no, not us. There were some leaks. There are some issues. We have nothing to do with that. But the main goal is to make sure that this winter will be extremely hard to all European citizens, and that it will create political pressure, and it will make the European countries to pull back on some of the sanctions and to pull back on the support of Ukraine. This should not happen. The issue is that we need to survive this winter as a united front. And we all know it will be extremely hard, but that should not distract us from what is important. Only unity can allow us to win the war against Putin. If we start backing off, then he will win. And this is not what we can allow to happen. You see that Russians are burning their gas at the borders just to show how well they can survive without the European money. But it is very clear to me that they have something to do with this sabotage.
Well, thank you so much, Ukrainian MP and leader of the Golos Party, Kira Rudik. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And I mean, it is quite shocking, and you do wonder whether or not many countries in the EU are moving fast enough in relation to getting rid of their dependence on Russia for their energy supply. If this does not really wake them up to energy security and its importance, and you have to really wonder what will.
Yeah, well, we were supposed to be speaking about this, weren't we, really, with Liz Truss's announcements on energy and her lifting on the ban on fracking. These are the sort of conversations she wishes we were having at the moment, because those were policies, announcements that were welcome. But clearly that's been overtaken massively by the trouble the government seem to have got themselves in at the moment with those fiscal policies. So we're, again, not talking about energy like we should be, our energy security. But there you go. Indeed. Get in touch with your views, GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Well, now, in other news, Windsor Castle will welcome the public back for the first time since the Queen's death. The Castle and St John Chapel has opened at 10 a.m. this morning, allowing visitors to see the Queen's final resting place and view the ledger stone inscribed with her name and George V's Memorial Chapel.
Yes, well, our reporter, Cameron Walker, is here to tell us more. Good morning, Cameron. I'm assuming this is going to be an incredibly popular site for people to visit, to come and pay their respects to the Queen again.
Yeah, it certainly is. The crowds are gathering round me, actually, to watch the changing of the guard, which is happening at 11 o'clock. But crowds were also here this morning in a massive queue, waiting to be one of the first to go into Windsor Castle following the death of Her Majesty the Queen and see her final resting place for the first time. And Grace and Anne, who joined me a bit earlier on breakfast, are here with me again, who have now seen Her Majesty's final resting place. What was it like?
Oh, the flowers were just beautiful. They're autumnal wreaths, beautiful berries, white flowers, absolutely sensational setting as well. And, you know, grief is the price we pay for love, and it's final now. So.
Well, and Grace, I mean, how did you feel seeing it?
I was really sad because we were the first to see her in Lambeth Bridge. So now we want to come and see her for the final time. And it's really sad that you see the marble down there and all the flowers just around it. It's really sad to see, because I lost my mom too, so she can be anybody's mom lying down there. It's sad when you lose your mom, whether it's 100 years gone or not. You see your mom, you feel it. So
yeah, I'm sorry about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that, Grace.
Yeah.
And Anne, how long did you stay looking at Her Majesty's grave? How long did you get?
We weren't allowed a great deal of time, but we actually were asked to move on a bit because we
had to move on.
We had a little bit more time than we should have, so we were admonished.
Yeah, she told me to move on. I didn't take notice of it. I just stood there and still watching.
I appreciate they've got thousands behind us, but Grace and I,
the first to come
yes,
here
I know
too,
that,
so.
but but we were admonished and asked, excuse me, can you move on? And we just moved on.
So how long did you have to wait before you got face-to-face?
Outside St George's Chapel door? Oh, well, we had the first appointment, didn't we? We were in within minutes. You know, it was terribly well organised. Everybody was so charming and lovely, weren't they?
Yes,
You know, particularly the canon or the chaplain.
Yes,
I've seen
she
her
was.
on
he was
I've seen
chatting
her on
to everybody
television,
there.
actually,
Yeah.
with Eamon, I think.
He was chatting to
Yes.
everyone there.
Yes, I think I have seen her on your television programme, Recognition, you know.
And Grace, did you see the rest of Windsor Castle while you were here as well?
I took pictures, stood outside. Inside. I said to the man we were talking about there.
Yes,
and he says, can I take picture here? She said, oh, there's no roof. You can take picture. I took
But not
picture
inside. They were
No
checking
inside.
vigorously
No
for
inside.
hidden cameras
Yeah.
or, you know, undercover surveillance.
Yes, you can take pictures there.
So just before I let you go, talk to me about A, your Welsh dragon, and B, your Union flag that you're draped in.
Well, I'm terribly proud of the Welsh people in Wales. I'm terribly proud that we have a new Prince and Princess of Wales, Catherine and William. And, you know, just terribly proud of everybody in Wales, really.
And what about you?
I'm also proud to be one of the Commonwealth countries. Now we are 56. We used to be 53, and now it's building up to 56 countries. So, and she was the head of the Commonwealth. So as soon as anything happens, everybody will say, "Oh, Grace, are you royal?" I say, "Yeah, I'm also from the royal family from Ghana." So, yeah, I'm really proud to have the Union Jack. Unfortunately, I didn't bring Ghana one, but it represents the same thing.
It's the thought that counts. And now, of course, King Charles is head of the Commonwealth. Well, tickets here to go into Windsor Castle are actually still on sale for today, but they're open every day apart from Tuesdays and Wednesdays if you want to get yourself down here.
Well, Cameron, thank you so much for that. I was going to say before you mentioned there with Anne and Grace, I did recognise them from being at the front of the queue back when the Queen's coffin was lying in state in Westminster Hall. They were very much at the front then as well. So clearly massive royal fans there. Thank you, Cameron Walker, our royal reporter.
Oh, that's so lovely. Well, also, the online Incel movement is reported to be getting more violent and extreme. Well, the Centre for Countering Digital Hate has analysed more than 1 million posts showing a rise in advocacy of rape and mass killing.
Yes, well, for those unfamiliar with the term incel, it basically means involuntary celibate, and it refers to members of online communities, groups of young men who consider themselves unable to attract women, and they tend to have very hostile views towards women as a result.
Well, according to the centre, members of the forum post about rape every 29 minutes, and more than 89% of those who post support rape and believe it to be acceptable. Well, joining us now is Callum Hood, Head of Research at the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. Thank you for joining us. I mean, how serious should we take this problem? Because, of course, you know, hearing about some of the things in the report, it is horrendous, but some people may say that, well, these are kind of young men that are saying horrible things online, but whether or not that actually kind of translates into real-world violence is another matter. I mean, what do you think?
Well, this is an emerging problem, and what we've seen, particularly in the US, but around the world, is that there have been 59 killings attributed to members of incel communities in recent years. And of course, just over a year ago in Plymouth, there was a young man perpetrated a mass shooting here in the UK. And our own research showed that he was a member of incel communities and had said himself that this would cause damage to his mental health and had caused him to be more full of rage and more hostile. And what our research is sort of showing is that while these people are often represented as sort of lone wolves, as loners, they're actually members of thriving online communities that are promoting extreme violence against women and mass shootings.
Do you think we take incels seriously enough? Because it is just seen as sort of, it's easy to laugh at men who say, oh, girls don't fancy me, and it's easy to dismiss them as sort of just losers going on message boards. But actually, if you look at in America, for example, a lot of the young male school shooters have often been found to be steeped in these communities because they have such a hatred towards women, because they don't think they can get girls, they think they're outcasts, and they're really resentful. Should we be taking them much, much more seriously?
I think we should be taking them more seriously. Like I said, the characterisation is of a lone wolf, but it's a pack of wolves, really. And the harms are not just limited to violence and mass shootings. What our research shows is that they are increasingly tolerant of paedophilia, for example. So we looked at conversations about paedophilia on this leading incel forum, and that 53% of users thought that child abuse was legitimate. And that was supported by the leadership of the forum, which had actually shockingly changed the rules of the forum in March 2022 from do not sexualise minors to do not sexualise prepubescent minors, therefore carving out a space in which they could sexualise underage girls. So I think there's a wider range of harms here, both to the younger men who get involved in these communities. It's harmful to them and to their mental health. Many of them come into these communities because they're concerned about their body image or because they're sort of unemployed and depressed. So it's a harmful place for them to be. And then it's causing harm to those around them. And we found users as young as 15, and we found users who said they'd been even referred to the UK Prevent programme because of their sort of involvement in extremism. And they come to this forum for help from other users. So there's a really concerning community here. And we know it's already resulted in killings. And there's the question of whether it's causing wider harm as well.
On that point about taking it more seriously, what does that mean practically? Because, I mean, when you look at the term incel, involuntary celibate, that can actually incorporate a very wide range of people, from men that might have a grievance and are expressing, some resentment online amongst like-minded people, to people that have genuinely violent, misogynistic beliefs and are willing to carry it out. So in terms of kind of practically dealing with this, what kinds of things would you recommend in terms of actually how we can respond?
Well, first of all, it's important to say that we're talking about the leading incel communities, and those leading incel communities are very extreme, are misogynist, promote all the things that I've just described, rape, violence, even paedophilia. There is a longer history to the incel community. In its early stages, it was more of a support network. That's not really true anymore of the leading community. So that's what we're focusing our reports and our recommendations on. And we think there's some really simple, practical steps that social media companies and big tech can take to try and close down some of the pathways that young men take into these communities and are then subject to sort of greater extremism. So, for example, many of these communities rank very high on Google search for some of the concerns that I've talked about. So search terms to do with body image or to do with suicide and depression. And we're saying that's not a healthy place for these young users to go who are concerned about those issues and be exposed to greater extremism. And then similarly on YouTube, there are actually, we found as a result of our report, some of the most referenced YouTube videos and YouTube channels on the Incel forum are Incel YouTube channels with 136,000 subscribers and 24 million views on their videos. So we're saying to YouTube, look, this is a really dangerous form of extremism, actually, and you probably don't want to be hosting it on your platform.
For talking to us about that, not a subject many people are familiar with, but thank you for that, Head of Research at the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. I feel very sorry, actually, for some of these young men, because I can see how it's very easy these days when social media and the dating scene is so heavily focused on looks, and when young women's standards are getting increasingly higher. You have to be 6 foot and in a £100,000 job these days to get the attraction of most women.
I don't think that is accurate. I mean, I don't really feel sorry for these men. I think actually for a lot of women, they would date someone that looks pretty average for a guy. If you dress well, have some good chat, you can kind of get quite far as a man. And
but you have to have charm
as well. But so work on yourself. Don't just start to hate and resent women in a misogynistic way.
You can see how a very shy young man can get easily drawn into these communities.
I just think grow up. Grow up. To them, I just think it's a bit pathetic. But, how you do it... That's not what you think. That's what matters. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We will be back after the break with an hour left of the show, so stay tuned.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Falarin Iman and Mercy Muroki on your TV, radio and online. We are with you until midday with a show jam-packed with today's biggest stories, lots of discussion, expert guests and our opinions as well as yours.
Yes, and we've been reading some of your views out already in the show, and keep them coming in because we will be going to more over the next hour or so. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email you need. That's all after these headlines.
Good morning. It's just coming up to 1 minute past 11. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's defended the Chancellor's economic strategy, saying her government had to take urgent action to get the economy growing. Liz Truss has backed Kwasi Kwarteng, calling his mini-budget the right plan. Yesterday, the Bank of England intervened in an attempt to stabilise the UK's economy by launching a £65 billion government bond buying programme. Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Chris Philp, told GB News he thinks the reaction from British businesses is vital to the growth plan.
Know that their members will be able to grow more quickly, invest more, create more jobs and higher paid jobs as a result of this growth plan. And that is the reaction I think that is the most important one, because it'll put this country on the path to higher growth, which is good for families and households because it'll mean more jobs and higher earnings. And it'll be good news for public services because it'll generate a more sustainable tax base to fund those critical things like the NHS, education and the police.
Meanwhile, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, told GB News the government's measures have resulted in financial instability.
This has been a reckless act of choice. It's not some tough decision that was necessary, and it's resulted in enormous instability for the country. That's why we've called for Parliament to be recalled, for this package to be paused and revisited.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It will prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. The average household's energy bill will rise by 25% to a capped £2,500. Meanwhile, the government's rolling out £1.5 billion in funding to help improve energy efficiency and slash bills. The Help to Heat scheme will see around 130,000 low-income households get an energy upgrade in their home, including installing heat pumps and solar panels. It will also help people save up to £700 a year on bills. Local authorities will be able to apply for funding from early next year. The Criminal Bar Association is considering whether to ballot barristers on ending strike action following new proposals in the row over pay. The Ministry of Justice says the government's now offering a further investment of £54 million in the criminal bar and solicitors. The CBA hasn't confirmed the ballot, but is said to be considering the terms on offer. A US citizen accused of killing a 19-year-old motorcyclist in Northamptonshire is set to appear in a UK court for the first time today. Anne Sakoulas is accused of causing death by dangerous driving after Harry Dunn was killed in a collision outside a military base in August 2019. Sakoulas has been granted diplomatic immunity, but is expected to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court via video link from America later. One of the most dangerous storms to hit the US in years has left nearly 2.5 million homes and businesses in Florida without power. Hurricane Ian has now weakened to a tropical storm, but when it made landfall late last night, it brought with it winds of up to 150 miles per hour. At its strongest, it was classified a catastrophic Category 4 storm. It flooded coastal towns along Florida's Gulf Coast and left homes in ruins. No serious injuries have yet been reported. Sweden has reported a new leak in a major undersea pipeline carrying Russian natural gas to the EU. It's the fourth leak to the Nord Stream pipeline reported this week by either Sweden or Denmark. The European Union suspects they've been caused by sabotage. Russia's dismissed suggestions it's attacked its own pipelines. Defence and Foreign Affairs editor for the Daily Telegraph, Con Coughlin, told us that the Russians have the capability to make the leaks.
Straight out of the Russian playbook to intimidate Europe into dropping its support for Ukraine. This sends a very bleak message to Europe and the outside world that, you know, the Russians have the capability to do this kind of thing. Of course, we have to couch this with an allegation because we just don't know what happened. And of course, we can all look very silly if it's just a technical fault that's happened. But it seems very unlikely at this point.
And another reason to call a dog a man's best friend. A new study suggests canines can sniff out stress in our sweat and breath. 4 dogs successfully identified the majority of samples of sweat or breath that had been taken from a stressed person after they'd completed a tricky maths problem. The researchers at Queen's University Belfast hope their study will help in the training of therapy dogs. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, let's get back to Mercy and Anaya with To The Point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Inaya Falarin Iman on your TV, radio and online.
Well, is Britain hurtling towards a full-blown economic crisis? That's the question on a lot of people's minds after this week saw the value of the pound plummet to record lows and government borrowing surge. We'll be looking into more of this with Laurie Lade, an economist.
We'll also be joined by travel expert Simon Calder to discuss alternatives to train travel this October as rail strikes and disruption look set to cause chaos yet again for millions of commuters and travellers alike. We'll be giving you all the updates on when those strikes are taking place.
And finally, the appeal court has ruled that the toppling of Edward Colston's statue in Bristol in 2020 at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement was a violent act and therefore not protected by human rights law. We'll get into this story later on in the show. I'm sure you'll have lots of opinions on that.
I was just looking at those images. We were just showing images of people rolling that statue into the river. Still don't see a single black person there, personally. But anyway, we have that all coming up and much more as well across the programme. We are here for another 50 minutes, so make sure you get your views in. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email.
Now, officials at the US Treasury say the Biden administration is alarmed over the UK's market turmoil since our government published its mini-budget on Friday.
Yes, well, they're concerned the volatility of the UK market may spill over into the global market and are working with the International Monetary Fund to pressure the Truss government to dial back its dramatic tax cuts and ease inflation.
Well, here to explain more on this is economist Laurie Lard. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, is there something...
Good morning,
my reaction
ladies.
to this seems quite anti-democratic. We have a UK-elected government, and on course, some people question the mandate and so on. But is it right for America and the IMF to be pressurising the UK government to change its economic policy?
Well, I'm not sure if it's pressure so much. It is very, very unusual. You're absolutely right about that. Unusual. Let's look at these things in turn. The IMF first, and I think the IMF comments had a lot greater impact in the market than did the comments coming out of various U.S. officials. Although I am surprised that the U.S. has had so much to say as well. But let's look at the IMF. The IMF statement yesterday basically said that they have very grave concerns about promising tax cuts without giving much information about how these tax cuts will be funded. We don't tend to see the IMF singling out a developed economy, a developed economy where governance is thought to be very, very strong. That statement from the IMF yesterday really seemed to me like the kind of statement we see sent out at somewhere like Argentina, a place where economic policy is really subjugated to political whims. And in fact, a lot of American traders and UK traders have started referring to the pound as the British peso. That's how mystified they are about the policies that are taking place here. That IMF statement really was extremely unusual. As for the comments coming out of the US, I'm a little bit surprised. We've had a couple of them. We haven't had anything from the top of the administration. We do know that Joe Biden did assemble his U.S. team, his economics team. But I think why the U.S. is concerned is not so much about what's going on here in the U.K. They are concerned about what is happening with the U.S. dollar, because, of course, as the pound gets weaker, the U.S. dollar gets stronger, and it may get stronger against the pound and a whole array of other currencies. And that presents a different set of problems for the U.S. when the dollar is very, very strong. It makes a lot of other economies have to handle higher inflation than they may have.
But again, you know, it does beg the question. We said in the intro there it was massive tax cuts. It's not that massive, is it, Laurie Laird? Am I wrong to say that? You know, yes, it's 45p to 40p, which is £2 billion. And yes, it's gone from the 20% basic income, basic rate to 19%. Surely that's not what has triggered this entire reaction.
Yes, that's exactly what has triggered this entire reaction. There isn't one individual tax cut that has been announced that is troubling. The whole package is troubling, and we're talking about NI contributions being reversed. We are talking about a reduction in income taxes sometime in the next fiscal year. We're also talking, and I think that the big problem with Kwasi Kwarteng was not so much the budget last Friday, although that was a problem. It was going on television over the weekend and saying, look, guys, there is more to come. And it's not just these tax cuts, it's the absence of any kind of information about how these will be paid for. So this entire scenario, it's not just one tax cut, the entire scenario of cutting taxes by $45 billion and not giving any information about where they will be paid for is the problem.
Take that point. I mean, the IMF has said that they're kind of worried that this is going to exacerbate inequality and so on. But, you know, I tend to think that I don't know if the IMF is in any position to be saying that. We know in the early 2010s their approach to Greece, which was a bailout if they had quite significant austerity measures, which actually massively exacerbated economic problems in Greece, to which they're kind of still recovering from. So the IMF is hardly this gold standard for sensible, level-headed economic policy.
I think that there are debates about whether recommendations that the IMF has made over the years are accurate. I think the IMF is often accused of a one-size-fits-all sort of scenario. But when the IMF is lending, and I'm glad you picked the example of Greece, when the IMF is part of a consortium that's lending billions and billions of dollars to the economy, one might argue that they are in a position to ask for some sort of structural changes in order to ensure that they get their money back. And the IMF doesn't have money of its own. It relies on contributions from lots of other countries, including, I have to add, the UK, which is the third or fourth biggest contributor to IMF funding. But let's go back to Greece. Let's go back to the example that you picked. The UK, this mini budget was so poorly taken by the markets. What happens is when the UK has to borrow, it issues things called gilts. Other countries call them bonds. The markets put an interest rate on that bond because they have to buy this stuff. That's how they lend to the UK government. At one point, before the Bank of England's intervention yesterday, UK bond yields or gilt yields were higher than Greek bond yields. That means that the UK had to pay more to borrow in the open market than Greece did, despite all of the problems that you just described with Greece being long-term problem child in Europe. That's how dramatic the markets think think that this tax-cutting plan is.
Yeah, and I just wonder, because obviously, you know, we have the Conservative Party conference coming up from Sunday to Wednesday. I'm sure the government are becoming anxious now as to how they're going to be received and perhaps considering whether they will change their mind, although they say they won't. What should the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, now be saying to the general public, to the markets, to reassure them?
Well, I didn't detect, I'm sure that you heard Liz Truss's series of interviews on the radio this morning, and you mentioned the word anxiety. I didn't detect any anxiety whatsoever. It's almost as if she is not looking at what financial markets are doing. What should Kwasi Kwarteng do? Really good question. At this point, it wouldn't look great. He's lost so much credibility with the markets. Were he to reverse anything that he has already announced, he'd lose even more credibility, although I think long-term that would probably be a better plan. Another big mistake that he made was to not get any independent assessment of the cost of these tax cuts. The Office for Budget Responsibility, which is tasked with doing just that, had prepared some estimates. The Treasury did not want them. I think the first thing that he could do is come clean about how much this is going to cost and what the actual numbers are rather than estimates. Actual numbers are on what this is going to do to borrowing. And I think yesterday when we got the signals coming out that he is ordering a spending review throughout other departments, looking for department efficiencies, which is a code for spending cuts, he has to be very, very careful about that. The next thing that is going to blow up in this government's face is labor unrest in the NHS. He has to be very, very careful.
And just finally, very, very quickly, I mean, do you buy any of the arguments that this is political in some way? You know, Joe Biden is clearly on the opposite side of the political spectrum, some may argue, to Liz Truss, and he's been very critical of Brexit and many other things that the UK has supported over the last few years. Do you buy in any of those arguments, that there are more political reasons, not just economic worries?
I don't. I think that you're right. It does not feel like there's a particularly warm relationship between Joe Biden and Liz Truss. And I think the issue of how to deal with Northern Ireland and the aftermath of Brexit is a sticking point between the two nations. But further than that, I don't think with all of the economic issues that are happening in the US right now, I don't think what's happening economically in the UK is a massive issue on Joe Biden's radar screen.
Fair enough.
Well, Laurie Laird, always great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, lady.
Economist there, as you could very much tell. Very clear warning there, really, from Laurie Laird, that actually, you know, what the Conservative government have done has been a cause of what we're seeing at the moment. And I'm just looking at my computer at the moment and seeing the number of mortgage products that continue to be withdrawn. And it's I mean, it's staggering. It's undeniable that the markets really are concerned and financial institutions really are concerned at the moment.
Yeah, and you know, I think that she's right. In some senses, he's in a rock and a hard place, Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. Because on the one hand, if he sticks to it, this could make things worse. But if he U-turns, then that could undermine his credibility as well. But in a very different tone, more serious tone, an inquest into the suicide of a 14-year-old Molly Russell in 2017 continues this week. The young girl had viewed thousands of posts concerning self-harm and suicide in the months before she died.
Yes, well, our London reporter Alice Porter has the latest for the inquest, from the inquest for us. Alice, really tragic case there. Just give us a summary of what's been found in this inquest so far.
Hi there, good morning. Well, this morning we've heard the summing up arguments from the lawyer representing Molly Russell's family, and it was a terribly damning indictment on social media companies. And from their point of view, they said that the material she was viewing was unsafe, that it was provided by social media companies, and that it very much contributed to her death. And that was something that was very much echoed by a child psychiatrist who gave evidence on Tuesday, who was saying that after viewing the content that Molly Russell had seen, that he was left unable to sleep for several weeks, which I think is an indication there of some of the content. We also heard from Oliver Sanders KC, who is representing Molly Russell's family, and he was very critical of the algorithms used by social media companies, and that she was very much pushed towards certain content. She was getting email notifications reminding her to look further into certain profiles, looking at certain pages, which she was then, and I quote, allowed to binge on this content. Now, Pinterest and Meta, who have both given evidence at this inquest over the last couple of weeks, have to a degree taken some responsibility and offered some apologies. The senior executive for Pinterest said that the content that she was viewing and the website wasn't safe for Molly Russell at the time when she was viewing the content, and said that he wouldn't let his own children look at some of the images. Now, out of interest, last night I actually looked on Instagram to see what kind of content is still readily available, and I have to say I was quite shocked. With a couple of clicks I was able to find some quite disturbing content, quotes linked to death and suicide, and some quite graphic images that we absolutely couldn't broadcast on GB News. And I think that was a point made in court today, that there is material that has been used as evidence in court that we absolutely couldn't broadcast, which obviously poses a problem. But I suppose what's important to stress with this case is this is really a landmark case. This is very much unprecedented. We've never been able to pore over a 14-year-old girl's social media records so much, but it's certainly provoked enormous questions as to the role of social media in keeping young people safe and whether they had a role to play in her suicide.
Well, thank you,
Alice, thank you so much for that. It's really tragic. We were just sort of left quiet there because it is unimaginable, really, what has happened with this poor girl who was obviously subjected to lots of horrific stuff on her social media.
Well, after the break, travel expert Simon Corder talks us through the October transport strikes. But before that, here's a look at the weather.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fine Thursday for most places. A little bit warmer than recent days as well because the winds are a touch lighter. But make the most of today because wet and windy weather is on the way, brewing up out here in the Atlantic. Still got a fair distance to travel, however. That is arriving tomorrow. Today we've got a couple of weather fronts. This one's clearing away, brought some heavy rain overnight. Disappearing now from the Channel Islands. And there's another line of showers just coming in across parts of Lincolnshire into northwest England, and that'll develop into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia this afternoon. So a scattering of showers here, but elsewhere most places dry, some sunny spells. It's still a touch below average for most, with mid to high teens at best, but the winds are lighter than they have been, and it doesn't feel too bad in the sunny spells. Those showers will drift further across the Midlands through this evening before tending to fizzle out. One or two keeping going into North Norfolk for a while, but most having a dry Friday evening. And with the clear skies across England and Wales, we'll see some fog patches developing. Quite a chilly night here as well, but all change in the northwest. Those weather fronts arrive, bringing a very different day on Friday across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Rain from the word go for Northern Ireland, spreading across Scotland. Heavy bursts of rain and gusty winds. particularly initially across northwest Scotland and then across northeast Scotland in the afternoon. Turning windy across England and Wales. East Anglia, the southeast, probably won't see any rain until very late in the day, but elsewhere we'll see that wet weather arriving across England and Wales during the afternoon. Temperatures again mid-teens but feeling cooler with that wind and heavy rain, which will push quickly-ish across the country, so we're looking at 3-4 hours worth of rain, eventually getting to East Anglia and the southeast during Friday evening, so bear that in mind if you are heading out. As we head into the weekends, well, still blustery on Saturday, but not as windy, with a mixture of sunshine and showers. Not many showers in the east, dry and bright for most of us on Sunday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Good morning, it's 11:26 and this is To The Point with Inaya Falarin Iman and myself, Mercy Muroki on GB News. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
Indeed. Well, rail strikes are returning this October, with thousands of workers expected to walk off the job in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. Travellers will face disruption to rail services on the 1st, the 5th and the 8th of October.
Yes, well, here to give us the details of all of this is travel expert Simon Calder. Great to have you in the studio, although I'm not sure I do want to see you here today because you're here to deliver some quite bad news.
Well, I'm afraid, yes, if you were hoping to travel this coming Saturday, well, the rail industry, all the train operators are saying, please don't try. There will be very, very little running. Only 1 in 9 trains is going to run. And the Rail Delivery Group, which represents all the train operators, have actually put out a statement saying, unlike in previous strike days, there is not going to be a service, for example, from London to Liverpool to Manchester to Glasgow to Edinburgh to Newcastle to Norwich. And if you have got trains running, well, good luck. The timetables should now be in place, but it is going to be the biggest stoppage for 40 years. That's because you've got the RMT union going on strike, and the crucial thing about that, we can just see the General Secretary Mick Lynch there, is that they've got 5,000 signallers who work for Network Rail, and if they walk out, then half the network automatically closes down. The other half you can sort of run, but only between limited hours. And on top of that, train drivers belonging to the ASLEF union and working for over a dozen train operators are going on strike, and that is just wiping things out. So Saturday is going to be worst of all, but you mentioned the other dates, the 5th of October, that's purely ASLEF drivers working for a large number of train operators, including all the kind of really big ones, so Thameslink and Great Northern and Southern in the London area, South Eastern, South Western Railways, those are all kind of commuter services, but also LNER, cross country, Great Western Railway. It's going to be pretty awful then. And then on the 8th of October, it's only going to be the RMT union going on strike, but that will cut 80% of trains from the timetables.
I mean, does it look like there's any budging from either side in this dispute? Because it has been ongoing, but actually it seems like Liz Truss wants to clamp down harder on striking, so I don't know who's...
Well, I think there is a bit of room for optimism, oddly. Now, these strikes were originally going to be actually taking place earlier in September, but the sad death of Her Majesty the Queen meant they were immediately postponed. In that time, the new Transport Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, has met the leaders of both the RMT union, Mick Lynch, and the ASLEF union, Mick Whelan, for talks. Now, that simply wasn't happening with the previous Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps. And as a result of that, well, I think we are possibly going to get closer. And indeed, last Friday, when we suddenly found that there was all this cash available in the government's statement, which you've been covering ever since, I was actually quite optimistic that they find what's basically a couple of £1 million a year to make up for the shortfall in ticket revenue, because fewer people are travelling by train, and also to give the train drivers and all the other rail staff the increases they want to try to keep up with the accelerating cost of living.
Well, is there any good news in the horizon for travellers, especially by train? Because it does always seem to, every year, it just gets worse. You know, you have the conditions on trains. I mean, the train I was in this morning, it was 4 carriages instead of 8. It was packed. First class had to be declassified. People are grumpy. Their trains are late. They're expensive. I mean, will we ever get some good news?
Mercy, I'm sure you were never grumpy, but yes,
I'm a morning person, so...
Declassifying first class shows how bad things are, and of course, as you know, that just means they say, oh, crikey, we've got so many people, anybody can go into first class to try to relieve the pressure. Well, yeah, we have a lot of structural issues with the railways, things like, actually, HS2 are in time going to help, but at the moment it's a right old mess, and the crucial thing is that while people like you and me are always travelling by train, there's an awful lot of other people who do not regularly travel by train, who absolutely have to be persuaded that this is a really good way to get around in order to keep the system running, keep the fare money coming in. And at the moment, the rail industry is doing a pretty good impression of an industry which is not fit for purpose. So I do hope it gets sorted out soon so that the excellent rail workers are happy, and more to the point, rail passengers are happy too.
Indeed. Well, I think you and many of our viewers also hope so. So thank you so much for joining us on the programme. Travel expert Simon Corder. Thank you.
Yes. Now we're just going to go to some of your views. Claudette has posed a question. I wonder how all the MPs who got rid of Boris now feel. Interesting question there, because, you know, there will be some people who have buyer's remorse, perhaps, with the Liz Truss.
But the question is, I mean, did Boris Johnson also have the answers to the challenges that we're facing now? And actually, under his leadership, many of them were exacerbated. With all of the hundreds of billions, if not nearly £1 trillion that was spent on COVID, and the cost of living crisis and energy crisis started under him. So maybe we are looking at the grass is always greener, or rose-tinted glasses on the past.
Well, Norman agrees that it's not necessarily about Boris or Liz Truss. He says what no one is mentioning is that 12 years of Tory policies have brought this crisis to the country. All the mini-budget did was raise the stakes for the rich and to hell with the poor. So he thinks it's their ideology rather than any particular Tory party leader. And as I said, we've been having more views sort of anti the government than ever before, really. So that's an interesting shift in the mood of our viewers.
Indeed, and I mean the polls seemingly reflect that, but keep all of your views coming. After the break, the toppling of the Edward Colston statue in June 2020 was a violent act, for that's according to an appeal court, and is therefore not protected by human rights. We'll be looking at the consequences of this decision just after the headlines.
Good morning, it's 11:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's defended the Chancellor's economic plans, saying her government had to take urgent action to get the economy growing. Liz Truss has backed Kwasi Kwarteng, calling his mini-budget the right plan. Yesterday, the Bank of England intervened in an attempt to stabilise the UK's economy by launching a £65 billion government bond buying programme. Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, told GB News the government's measures have resulted in financial instability.
This has been a reckless act of choice. It's not some tough decision that was necessary, and it's resulted in enormous instability for the country. That's why we've called for Parliament to be recalled, for this package to be paused and revisited.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It'll prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. From next month, the average household energy bill will rise by at least 25% to a capped £2,500. Russia is to formally annex 4 areas of Ukraine following so-called referendums on becoming part of the country. President Vladimir Putin is to hold a signing ceremony tomorrow in Moscow for the 4 territories, which include Donetsk and Zaporizhia. The West have labelled the vote, which closed on Tuesday, a sham. And US rapper Coolio, known for the 1990s song Gangsta's Paradise, has died at the age of 59. The hit became one of the most successful raps of all time, winning a Grammy in 1996. Coolio's exact cause of death yesterday hasn't been revealed, but his manager told US media he was found unresponsive on the bathroom floor of a friend's house in Los Angeles. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.086 and 1.121 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,520 and 28 pence per ounce.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's 11:37. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Falaran, Iman and Mercy Muroki. We're live on your TV, online and radio.
Yes, now Court of Appeal judges have ruled that the toppling of the Edward Colston statue in Bristol was a violent act. This means it was not protected by the human rights law.
Well, the bronze statue of the 17th century merchant was thrown into Bristol Harbour in June 2020 after being toppled by Black Lives Matter protesters opposing his links to the Royal Africa Company slave trade.
Yes, well, 4 of the protesters, who were deemed the Colston 4, were cleared by a jury at Bristol Crown Court of criminal damage. We can actually have a quick look at what Home Secretary Suella Braverman tweeted after she referred the case to the Court of Appeal when she was Attorney General. She said, quote, "In April, I referred the Colston statue case to the Court of Appeal for clarification of the law relating to criminal damage and protest rights. My reference was successful on all counts. Well done to all those involved."
Now, it is clear the conduct fell outside of the protection of the convention. This was not a case of peaceful protest. The toppling of the statue was violent, the damage was significant, and the proportionality of the conviction could not arise. Well, here to discuss more on this story and the implications of the ruling is Dr. Ruth Dudley-Edwards, a historian and journalist. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme. I mean, what is your reaction? I mean, for many people watching GB News in particular, they were very surprised at the result, that this could be protected under kind of human rights to enact what many people understood as criminal damage of public property. And now this ruling seems to have at least vindicated that for future rulings. So it's important to say that this doesn't actually change the decision of the ruling of the Colston 4, but in terms of future cases, it clarifies that. But what's your reaction?
I think it's fabulous. I'm delighted. And I'm becoming a great fan of the new Home Secretary. Not words I often use, really, because she had the foresight to do this in the past. There are many other reasons they might have been found not guilty, but I think terribly important to have this. I mean, it's interesting, the Liberty crowd, who have become extremely relaxed, let us say, about breaches of the peace and the rest of it, are very distressed by this, because there really seems to be a view out there that just to feel very strongly about somebody and something entitles you to do anything you damn well like, including committing what was criminal damage.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. I mean, it definitely shocked me and a lot of other people that they were able to invoke sort of human rights in the first place. I mean, is there, from your perspective, is there a sea change coming somewhere along the line when it comes to issues like this, where people of a particular ideology are sort of able to just impose their will on everybody else without much repercussion?
I truly think we've reached the tipping point. I mean, yesterday you had our great Home Secretary hailing, really persuading the Sussex police that a man who assaults children and is found guilty of it and then says he's a woman should not be referred to as she and sent to a woman's prison, where he can now presumably have his way with unfortunate female prisoners.
Yeah.
I mean, we are in a shocking position. It's beyond jokes when you read about a woman going into a changing room in a department store and finds somebody with a beard waving his willy in there. and announcing that he's a woman and complaining that she's a bigot if she resents it. And the store going along with it.
Yeah.
Because we have been suffering from a shocking outbreak of corporate cowardice about all that.
Yeah.
Publishers dropping books because the 23-year-old in the contracts department has said that our feelings are hurt, that something that's heretical is being published. That's happening everywhere. It has been happening with the courts. It's been happening all over the place.
On that point, and just on that Colston 4 case, again, Raj Chadha, partner at Hodge and Jones and Allen, which is a legal firm, said that they're disappointed with the judgment. It said in their statement, it is a shame that this is the Attorney General's focus rather than the multiple crises facing this country. I mean, what do you say to people who say that the issues around trans and gender are kind of distractions, cultural distractions, when we are facing an economic crisis? Or do you not see those things as mutually exclusive?
They're very necessary. You have children's lives being ruined now by trans activists.
Mm.
You know, I have a very dear friend who's trans, and I would always be happy to go into a loo with her or anything else. She's been living as a woman for years. She's absolutely fine. She's terrified by what the trans activists are doing.
Yeah.
Because she says it's wrecking the reputation of all the trans people who are genuinely, who weren't predatory males,
Yeah.
were just decent people who felt they were in the wrong body.
Yeah.
They've done terrible. And then there are the children whom they're destroying. The whole fad for trans stuff is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And it's a nightmare for parents, and they're not being backed up by the organs of the state or the establishment.
Well, let's hope that Suella Braverman, our new Home Secretary, will be very strong on many of these important issues. Well, thank you for joining us, Dr. Ruth Dudley-Edwards, historian and journalist.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, it's a BGC Charity Day 2022. Today, the American Financial Services Company's annual commemoration of colleagues lost in the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks. And raising money on a London city trading floor are celebrity stars like Damian Lewis, Holly Willoughby and Rio Ferdinand, who all hope to help raise millions for charitable causes.
Well, Ellie Costello is there for us now. Thank you for joining us. Ellie, please tell us more about what is going on.
Hello, yes, we're on the BGC trading floor here in Canary Wharf. It's an electric atmosphere. We've got all of the people here working really, really hard on their trade. You can see at the moment from these jackets, we're now on the sterling desk. So these brokers are working really, really hard here this morning alongside celebrities who are doing the rounds here this morning. We've seen dozens of them already. We've had the actress Sadie Frost, got Davina McCall, the presenter. I've just seen Sam Allardyce just cross over there into that corner as well. And they're going to continue working alongside the traders today, hoping to raise millions of pounds for charity. And the traders that you can see behind me, actually, they're not being paid today. Everything that they make, all the commission is going to charity. And they do this every single year. They tried to do it on the 11th of September to commemorate the 658 colleagues in the New York office that died in the 9/11 attacks in 2001. Now, of course, Queen Elizabeth II passed away earlier this month. That meant that Charity Day was pushed back, but it is going at full force today, and it's going very, very well, I've been told. Well, earlier I spoke to Rio Ferdinand, the former footballer and pundit, about why he wanted to be here today.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you come up here, I could never, ever work on a floor like this. I've got a headache already. It's crazy. But obviously all of the interactions, the transactions have been great, and it's obviously going towards a great cause. So the more manic and crazy it is up here, obviously the better it is.
And what technique are you going for on the phone? So once the trader hands you the phone, what are you going for?
I'm going for a confused look, and I just say to the guys, write down what you need me to say, because they say all these codes and stuff, and I'm thinking, I can't even remember them. So I need to write it down, and I'll recite it like that, and we get there. Well, obviously, the charity I'm here for, Women of Wellbeing, it does research and it educates in terms of women. I've got wonderful women in my family, my children, my wife. So to be a part of that charity that comes here and actually you see the transactions that go on that benefit all the charities that you can see behind me on this board, it's a no-brainer. You just turn up, and I think it's for many years I've come here now, and you see loads of different faces and celebrities come here from different backgrounds, all with one common goal, which is to help. This is putting a spotlight on really good charities where people get to actually give time but see that it actually has a big impact with different charities around England.
That's Rio Ferdinand there, the former footballer and pundit, explaining why he wanted to be here today on BGC Charity Day. I did just want to show you just how busy it is on this trading floor. You might be able to make out just behind me, Battersea Cats and Dogs Home have just arrived with some dogs on the trading floor, and Amanda Holden is one of their patrons. She's here today trying to raise money for them. So it's all going on. You can hear the bells, you can hear the phones. Lots of trading going on today, hoping to make millions of pounds for a really good cause. They made $12 million on this day last year. They're really hoping they can do even more this year.
Well, Ellis, thank you so much for updating us. And of course, all the best to the charity. I hope they manage to top that record that they had last year for that £12 million they raised.
Well, in a more bizarre story, airline Virgin Atlantic has scrapped its gender uniforms for pilots, cabin crew and ground staff.
Yes, well, staff will be given the free choice to wear either red jacket and skirt combo, that's the classic sort of Virgin uniform, or the burgundy blazer and trousers fit, regardless of what gender they are. So essentially, we're used to seeing the women in the red jacket and skirt, or the men in the navy. And now they can basically choose.
Well, it will also be making pronoun badges for its crew members and adding the option for the genderless MX title to be added on customer tickets should they want one. Well, here to talk to us about this is sociologist and social commentator Professor Frank Furedi. Thank you so much for joining us. I kind of, call me old-fashioned, but I kind of like the genders sometimes being separated. It does seem quite frustrating that everything is going towards the blurring of the boundaries. I mean, is this a good thing? What do you think?
Well, I think what it really represents is an attempt to indicate to the world that we're on the right side of history. And what's really happening here is that the PR companies and the advertising agencies that advise Virgin are telling them that to be edgy and to kind of indicate how virtuous you are, you got to make these noises about essentially destroying the boundary between men and women. And what's very interesting is that if they were genuinely interested in making their staff feel comfortable, they would just simply say, let everybody wear trouser suits. Then there really isn't any kind of distinction that people might feel unhappy about. But instead of doing that, what they're doing is they're putting on this performance of virtue that we love to give you our pronouns. We don't care what kind of clothes you wear. And it seems to me that this is just a way in which a new kind of fashionable branding exercise is carried out, principally promoted by the PR and the advertising industry. And I think what they're doing is essentially calling into question everything that so people have lived by for thousands of years. And they're turning that into a little joke, because if you look at the ad, it seems very cute, very funny, and who's going to be angry at this? But actually, it's got a very insidious message that it communicates.
Do you take the critique, though, of your argument that actually they're just giving people the choice to do this if they want to? They're not necessarily enforcing, they're not telling men they have to wear skirts or telling women they have to wear trousers. And many people would say, hang on a minute, people on your side are advocating free speech and free choice. Why then shouldn't people have the free choice of whether they want to wear a skirt or trousers?
Well, in principle, you can have free choice, but if I'm a barrister, I don't have the choice to come in jeans and T-shirts and go to the court in that kind of a way. There's a certain decorum that one expects, and I'm all for choice. But in this case, it's not so much giving us choice. What they're doing is sending us a signal, telling us that this is really cool, this is the future. And those of us that believe that by and large people should dress in accordance with their who they are somehow old-fashioned and simpletons. I'm quite happy to let everybody wear whatever they feel like in terms of their lives, but in terms of a workplace, I don't want the teacher of my son to come to wearing a skirt. Call me old-fashioned, but that's just weird.
Frank, thank you so much. I have cut you a bit short, but it is because we have something very, very cute in our next segment. So we're going to go to that. Frank already there, social commentator, and I can hear him making a sound already. Well, look, ask any dog lover, and they're likely to tell you that their dog has a sixth sense for noticing when their owners are stressed, worried, or anxious.
But it turns out they still have only 5 senses, but one of them is heightened to such an extent that they can actually smell stress. Well, this is according to researchers at Queen Mary Belfast, who say that dogs can smell chemical changes in our breath and sweat that occur when we are under stress.
Yes, well, here to give us more on this is dog trainer Robin James. Robin, thank you for coming in.
And he's got a little friend with him today.
This beautiful, gorgeous little
He's a bit camera shy. He's a bit... Oh, he's absolutely perfect.
Let me move him round for you.
Oh,
this is Manny, 9-week-old dachshund boy. Absolutely amazing, isn't he?
Beautiful.
You must have the best job in the world,
I
surely.
do have the best job in the world.
Look at his eyes.
Puppies give you so much unconditional love.
Yeah.
They're just full of joy and happiness. They're kind, they're gentle. And when they're with me, I like to make them perfect.
Yeah, you know, what do you make of this study? Because, I mean, there's lots of studies that have been done about how animals, and even stroking an animal, can really release, good hormones and good chemicals in your body. And I'm feeling that now already, just looking at him. So you must think, well, yes, absolutely, the positive health benefits have always been there.
Yeah, absolutely. Dogs are little healing creatures. They
likes
honestly
a belly
are.
rub.
He loves a belly rub. And when you rub his belly, you're actually reducing his blood pressure. You're reducing his heart rate. And what's amazing is you're reducing yours as well. So your actual heart rate, your blood pressure's going down, your stress is going down. And in relation to your question, dogs have so much empathy. They love us so much. And if we are feeling stressed or down, there's nothing better than giving a cuddle to your dog. And as you rightly say, it releases amazing hormones and gets rid of the stress hormone cortisol and actually just makes you feel amazing. I think they're healing, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And with this, study that's been done, which says they can essentially sniff out stress.
Yeah.
Do you think that, we still have so much to learn about how dogs can not only be our best friends and be absolutely adorable, but actually can potentially be used in our health service, to help people become healthier, to sniff out diseases, perhaps?
Absolutely. I mean, their little schnozzle here, their little nose, like 10,000 times more sensitive than ours. They, they smell fear, they smell stress, they smell disease. And, they really are absolutely remarkable, and they can be trained in such a way that so many therapy dogs which are taken into businesses, hospitals, old age people's homes, where they go in and actually are therapy dogs. And it's amazing, even being in your studio today, on how many people have actually given little Manny a stroke, and it's brought so much happiness, joy to them.
Left me speechless.
We love that.
And just very finally, because we have 1 minute, and I think this is really important, there'll be people, and including I, who's like, oh my gosh, I want one. I'm going to go on the internet immediately and get one. Just tell us, what is the safest way to ensure you're getting a dog from somebody who's a legitimate breeder?
Well, OK, so the first thing is that you need to speak to that breeder, you need to click with them, you want to be doing FaceTime calls with them, you want to be seeing the mum and the litter together, you want to be speaking to them about the vet and the history and everything going forward, how many litters that dog has had. So these are the main questions that I ask in my puppy finding service.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We're going to carry on stroking the puppy, I think. That is it from us here at To The Point, but don't go away, because up next is GB News Day with Gloria De Piero and Mark Longhurst.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fine Thursday for most places.
a little bit warmer than recent days as well because the winds are a touch lighter. But make the most of today because wet and windy weather is on the way, brewing up out here in the Atlantic. Still got a fair distance to travel, however. That is arriving tomorrow. Today we've got a couple of weather fronts. This one's clearing away, brought some heavy rain overnight, disappearing now from the Channel Islands. And there's another line of showers just coming in across parts of Lincolnshire into northwest England, and that'll develop into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia this afternoon. So a scattering of showers here, but elsewhere most places dry, some sunny spells. It's still a touch below average for most, with mid to high teens at best, but the winds are lighter than they have been, and it doesn't feel too bad in the sunny spells. Those showers will drift further across the Midlands through this evening before tending to fizzle out, one or two keeping going into North Norfolk for a while, but most having a dry Friday evening. And with the clear skies across England and Wales, we'll see some fog patches developing. Quite a chilly night here as well, but all change in the northwest. Those weather fronts arrive, bringing a very different day on Friday across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Rain from the word go for Northern Ireland, spreading across Scotland. Heavy bursts of rain and gusty winds, particularly initially across northwest Scotland and then across northeast Scotland in the afternoon. Turning windy across England and Wales. East Anglia, the southeast, probably won't see any rain until very late in the day, but elsewhere we'll see that wet weather arriving across England and Wales during the afternoon. Temperatures again mid-teens, but feeling cooler with that wind and heavy rain, which will push quickly-ish across the country. So we're looking at 3-4 hours worth of rain, eventually getting to East Anglia and the southeast during Friday evening. So bear that in mind if you are heading out. As we head into the weekends, well, still blustery on Saturday, but not as windy, with a mixture of sunshine and showers. Not many showers in the east, dry and bright for most of us on Sunday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello and a very warm welcome to GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. Well, this morning, Prime Minister Liz Truss spoke to a regional journalist after seemingly going into hiding following the reaction to Friday's mini-budget.
Well, the Prime Minister hit the airwaves after what appeared to be a prolonged period of radio silence to reiterate that her tax cut plans were necessary to stimulate economic growth. However, the White House has seemingly once again disagreed. Joe Biden's Commerce Secretary this time branding the UK a case study on the failure of trickle-study-down economics.
We will bring you all of this and the news that matters to you at home. Before that, it's the latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Thank you, Gloria. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister's defended the Chancellor's economic strategy, saying her government had to take urgent action to get the economy growing. Liz Truss has backed Kwasi Kwarteng, calling his mini-budget the right plan. Yesterday, the Bank of England intervened in an attempt to stabilise the UK's economy by launching a £65 billion government bond-buying programme. Liz Truss says Britain has taken decisive action to help people get through a difficult winter.
It's a difficult time. We're facing a global economic crisis. It was the right decision to take, and we need to continue to make sure we deliver the economic growth, we deliver the jobs and opportunities, and that is the long-term future that we have set out.
Meanwhile, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury Pat McFadden told GB News the government's measures have resulted in financial instability.
This has been a reckless act of choice. It's not some tough decision that was necessary, and it's resulted in enormous instability for the country. That's why we've called for Parliament to be recalled, for this package to be paused and revisited.
Households are being urged to take their energy meter readings ahead of a price hike on the 1st of October. It'll prevent firms from estimating usage and charging energy used before Saturday at a higher rate. The average household's energy bill will rise by 25% to a capped £2,500. Meanwhile, the government's rolling out £1.5 billion in funding to help improve energy efficiency and slash bills. The Help to Heat scheme will see around 130,000 low-income households get an energy upgrade in their home, including installing heat pumps and solar panels. It'll also help people save up to £700 a year on bills. Local authorities will be able to apply for funding from early next year. The Criminal Bar Association's considering whether to ballot barristers on ending strike action following new proposals in the row over pay. The Ministry of Justice says the government's now offering a further investment of £54 million in the criminal bar and solicitors. The CBA hasn't confirmed the ballot, but is said to be considering the terms on offer. A US citizen accused of killing a 19-year-old motorcyclist in Northamptonshire is set to appear in a UK court for the first time today. Anne Sakoulas is accused of causing death by dangerous driving after Harry Dunn was killed in a collision outside a military base in August 2019. Sakoulas has been granted diplomatic immunity but is expected to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court via video link from America later. Russia's to formally annex 4 areas of Ukraine tomorrow following so-called referendums on becoming part of the country. President Vladimir Putin will hold a signing ceremony in Moscow for the territories across southern and eastern Ukraine, including Donetsk and Zaporizhia. The West have labelled the vote, which closed on Tuesday, a sham. Sweden has reported a new leak in a major undersea pipeline carrying Russian natural gas to the EU. It's the 4th leak to the Nord Stream pipeline reported this week by either Sweden or Denmark. The European Union suspects they've been caused by sabotage. Russia's dismissed suggestions it's attacked its own pipelines. One of the most dangerous storms to hit the US in years has left nearly 2.5 million homes and businesses in Florida without power. Hurricane Ian has now weakened to a tropical storm, but when it made landfall late last night, it brought with it winds of up to 150 miles per hour. At its strongest, it was classified a catastrophic Category 4 storm. It flooded coastal towns along Florida's Gulf Coast and left homes in ruins. No serious injuries have yet been reported. And another reason to call a dog a man's best friend. A new study suggests canines can sniff out stress in our sweat and breath. 4 dogs successfully identified the majority of samples of sweat or breath that had been taken from a stressed person after they'd completed a tricky maths problem. The researchers at Queen's University Belfast hope their study will help in the training of therapy dogs. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Mark and Gloria.
Welcome back to GB News Day. So everyone has been counting the cost financially and politically, of course, of the emergency intervention by the Bank of England to buy up government bonds on a massive scale to stave off what it called a material risk to UK financial stability, which we now know included a potential collapse of the UK's defined benefit system.
We're joined now by GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan with On the Money. Liam.
We're learning, hopefully, that we're going to get news from the Prime Minister.
Liam, the Prime Minister's been doing a broadcast round this morning insisting that her plans are right. Just tell us a little bit about what she's been saying, and it's the very strong suggestion is there will be no change of course.
She's giving no quarter. She's posing as, the Iron Lady. That's certainly what some newspaper headline writers are saying, trying to elicit headlines that the lady's not for turning. Clearly, if she changes her tax policies because financial markets have been buffeted, if she shows that currency traders can push her around, then that seriously dents her authority as a brand new Prime Minister with a brand new Chancellor, of course. Look, the Bank of England intervention yesterday, it seems so far to have worked, and we should say that. A lot of people watching GB News, following the news closely, are frightened. So they can take it from me that for now, at least, the pound is relatively stable. It's actually gained some. Today, it's back up at $1.08, $1.09. It went all the way down to $1.03, of course, an all-time low. But more importantly, even though the pound gets the headlines, because we all sort of understand currencies better than we understand debt markets. The debt market is where the real action is. This is when the government sells its debt to big investors, insurance companies, pension funds and so on. And the cost of government borrowing had been going up a lot. And that ripples out across all interest rates across the economy. That's why mortgage lenders were withdrawing products for new people. No one's existing mortgage is under threat from mortgage lenders, withdrawing products for new people. But in the aftermath of that intervention by the Bank of England yesterday, the kind of first rung on the ladder of emergency measures, the debt markets have calmed and government borrowing costs for money for 10 years have gone down from well over 4.5% a year all the way down below 4%, and now they're up back around 4.1%, which is kind of where we think they should be, given that the Bank of England and all other central banks around the world pretty much are raising interest rates.
We can now have a listen to the Prime Minister, and then you're going to stay with us for a bit more reaction, but we mentioned that she's been talking in the last hour defending her plans to cut taxes.
I think we have to look at what situation this country would be in if we hadn't acted. People were facing fuel bills, energy bills of up to £6,000. We had very high inflation expectations and an economic slowdown. And what we've done is we've taken decisive action. First of all, to make sure that nobody is paying more than a typical fuel bill of £2,500. That will come in this Saturday. But also to reduce our tax burden, to make sure we grow the economy and also curb inflation. And that's so important. It's a difficult time. We're facing a global economic crisis brought about by Putin's war in Ukraine. And what was right is that Britain took decisive action to help people get through what is going to be a difficult winter.
Is it credible to suggest that the mini-budget on Friday didn't have an impact on what has happened over the last few days? Are you really suggesting that?
Well, the biggest measure in the mini-budget was the support we have given to people on their energy bills. And it was absolutely right that we gave that support, because without that support, people would be facing high fuel bills this winter. I was worried about people struggling to heat their homes. But also we would have seen businesses like pubs go out of business. So it was the right decision to take, and we need to continue to make sure we deliver the economic growth, that we deliver the jobs and opportunities, and that is the long-term future that we have set out.
Okay, just on delivery then, we're being told already that government departments are looking for efficiencies. They're being told to look for efficiencies. Where on earth are those efficiencies going to come from?
It's absolutely right that we always need to get value for taxpayers' money. Every pound that we take from somebody is a pound they could be spending on their future, on their what they need to support themselves. So it's right that we get value for money, and I'm always making sure that we deliver that.
Where from? How are you going to do it?
Well, there are always ways that we can organise things more efficiently, but what I want to make sure is taxpayer money is focused on frontline services, on getting our GP appointments, making sure people can get to see a doctor, making sure we deliver on our road projects, all of those things that people rely on us for. But there are plenty of areas where the government can become more efficient.
Can you give me an example?
Well, not at the moment. We're continually reviewing to make sure we're getting good value for money, and I think that's what taxpayers expect.
So, Prime Minister speaking that into literally just in. Let's get some reaction. Liam's still here with us. And just looking at the reaction, Gerard Lyons, economist who you know well, Sir Mark Carney, former Governor of the Bank of England, saying it's not necessarily this plan for growth, it's how they presented it, how they failed to communicate it and prepare the markets.
I think that's right. You know, Liz Truss is an extremely clever, mathematically inclined woman. She knows her way around the national accounts. She was, by all accounts, a very effective Chief Secretary to the Treasury. That's number 2 to the Chancellor. And she made some good points. She, you know, as politicians do, placed the blame squarely with Vladimir Putin, even though UK inflation was at a 30-year high before the war in Ukraine. But clearly, the biggest measure that Kwasi Kwarteng took in this now ridiculously named mini-budget was the energy price cap. It's like an open check mark, as we've discussed. If the wholesale gas price goes to the moon, the government has to deliver capped energy for household and businesses. That is going to cost hundreds of billions of pounds.
And for 2 years. For
2 years for households, as you rightly say, for 6 months for businesses, though that is under review. But if gas prices come down, and they have been coming down sharply in the last 3 or 4 weeks, then the energy price cap won't cost any money at all. But I think Gerard Lyons is right. I think Mark Carney is right to a degree that that top rate of tax change at a time when people are trying to make ends meet, it looked politically inept. It looked a bit tin-eared and indulgent by the right of the Conservative Party, and I think the markets felt this government, if it's going to get a kicking in the media, this is a moment to test out their resolve.
Can you answer a question on 2 things which matter to people's everyday lives? 1, are their pensions safe? And 2, what's going to happen to their mortgage rates and mortgage offers? OK, across the world, interest rates are going up. Mini-budget or no mini-budget, we were going to see big interest rate rises in the coming weeks, in the coming months, in the run-up to Christmas. That was always going to happen. That was nailed on. It may be that the Bank of England brings one of those interest rate rises forward if the currency is vulnerable, because, of course, a lower currency means we import more inflation, bigger cost of living squeeze. But interest rates were always going to go up, and that will continue. At the moment, in the money markets, the weight of opinion, with people placing bets with real money, suggests that interest rates, Bank of England interest rates, could peak at around 5.5% to 6%. Having said that, that Bank of England intervention yesterday has damped down those expectations because of for technical reasons. Now, in terms of pensions, I'm actually quite. I'm not entirely convinced at what the big wheel rolling investment bankers said to the Treasury yesterday, that pensions were in danger. I think that's a bit of a ruse, if I'm honest. I've seen many investment bankers try and scare ministers into doing things. And look, the financial markets, they love what happened yesterday because the Bank of England effectively started printing more money and it ends up in financial markets.
Well, the way they were trying to explain it was that, going back to Northern Rock, that they were in danger of getting this sort of doom spiral, that things ran out of control, and therefore that's why they had to intervene.
Yeah, but they would say that, wouldn't they? Because, again, the financiers love what the Bank of England's done because it juices up equity markets. And makes them all wealthier because they own lots and lots of assets. Look, I'm not being completely cynical about this. There may be some danger. If you're already drawing your pension, there is no danger. And for now, at least, the bank... And indeed, if you're about to annuitise, I can explain that if you want. If you're about to annuitise your pensions, and many people are... I had 4 people ring me about it yesterday and email me. This is actually quite good that interest rates
because you get a higher return.
Because you get a better income for the rest of your life.
Yeah, just to ask you what you're sort of getting in terms of the vibes from the city and elsewhere about November, when this next fiscal event, as they so delicately call it now, whether it's minor or major, are you getting an indication that they are rethinking not necessarily what they'll do on tax, but how they actually introduce it and nuance it?
I certainly think the presentation will change. The 23rd of November is a date that the Treasury hadn't announced, but they did announce it, you know, when the financial market started getting a bit stroppy. That will be it's not a full budget. It's an autumn statement, which is like a budget, just at a different time of year. And there will be fully costed estimates from the Office for Budget Responsibility.
And that's the key, I guess, bearing in mind what people like Mel Stride have said.
That's right. The Treasury Select Committee chair, who complained that the Office for Budget Responsibility, the Treasury watchdog, didn't do a full set of forecasts with the mini budget. But the question is, will the 23rd of November be soon enough, or will financial markets again try and put their fingers around the throats of ministers and try and force them to do certain things? It's an irony, as I've said before on your show, that there isn't a Monetary Policy Committee meeting in October. The next one is in November as well, so there's a big gap before the next kind of policy intervention. If the Bank of England did do an emergency interest rate rise, that would be an enormous move, a much bigger move than the rather technical intervention we saw yesterday.
Liam, thank you for that. And we'll keep an eye on the markets. Of course, you'll report back for us. But
Talking still on the economy, joined now by David Mellor, the former Chief Secretary to the Treasury under John Major. David, good to see you. You were a Cabinet Minister when the Tories lost their reputation for economic competence in the John Major government, in the olden days. Can you see any parallels between what is going on today and what went on when you had a ringside seat?
No, I can't, because it was very different. This was a membership of a European financial mechanism that, ironically, the then Chancellor Norman Lamont didn't agree with, and of course it carried him away. But what it meant was, of course, public confidence was lost in the government's ability to handle the economy. So even though under Kenneth Clarke the economy strengthened greatly before 1997, the Tories were carried away to one of the worst defeats they've ever experienced.